What I observe unfolding in Iranian strategic calculations regarding Strait of Hormuz closure represents nothing less than the systematic weaponization of global energy infrastructure during domestic political crisis, and I need to be absolutely clear about what this means for international commerce, alliance coordination, and regional military positioning when nearly 20% of global oil supplies transit through a waterway that Iranian Revolutionary Guard forces can effectively close through coordinated naval operations, mining activities, and missile strikes against commercial shipping. The intelligence assessments I have reviewed indicate that Iranian leadership views Hormuz closure as ultimate leverage against international sanctions and domestic opposition pressure, while creating systematic global economic pressure that could force international accommodation of Iranian regime survival requirements and nuclear weapons development objectives. You know, what makes the Hormuz threat particularly dangerous during current Iranian domestic crisis is that regime survival calculations increasingly prioritize external conflict and international confrontation over diplomatic solutions and domestic stability. While Revolutionary Guard naval capabilities have advanced substantially through asymmetric warfare development, advanced missile systems, and coordination with proxy networks that enable comprehensive closure operations beyond traditional naval blockade scenarios, the intelligence is clear, crystal clear, that Iranian military planning for Hormuz closure operates through systematic coordination between naval forces, coastal missile batteries, mining operations, and proxy coordination that could maintain effective shipping disruption for extended periods despite American and allied military intervention designed to restore commercial navigation and energy supply security. Congressional intelligence briefings reveal systematic Iranian investment in anti-ship missile technology, naval mining capabilities, and small boat swarm tactics specifically designed to exploit Hormuz geographical constraints while creating defensive advantages that enable sustained closure operations despite superior American and allied naval capabilities positioned throughout the Persian Gulf region. I think what we need to understand about Iranian Hormuz strategy is that it represents comprehensive economic warfare capability that leverages global energy dependence and supply chain vulnerabilities to achieve strategic objectives that conventional military capabilities or diplomatic pressure cannot accomplish through traditional state-to-state competition and regional power projection. But there is also the immediate global economic implications that extend far beyond regional Middle Eastern security into systematic disruption of international commerce, energy pricing, and financial market stability that affects every major economy while creating inflationary pressure and supply chain disruption that global recovery from recent economic challenges cannot adequately absorb through strategic petroleum reserves and alternative energy supply coordination. I am analyzing economic assessments that detail systematic global impact scenarios where Hormuz closure triggers immediate oil price increases exceeding previous energy crisis levels, while creating cascading effects throughout transportation, manufacturing, and consumer markets that compound existing economic pressures and political instability throughout multiple regions simultaneously. What troubles me most profoundly about American military response capabilities is that effective Hormuz reopening requires comprehensive naval operations, mine clearance activities, and sustained military presence that could trigger direct warfare with Iranian forces, while Iranian asymmetric naval capabilities and geographical advantages create systematic challenges for traditional American military superiority and power projection that regional conflicts have demonstrated through previous Persian Gulf military operations and naval coordination requirements. The alliance coordination implications include unprecedented requirements for Saudi, Emirati, Kuwaiti, and other regional partners to coordinate naval operations, alternative shipping routes, and economic cooperation, while Iranian Hormuz closure directly threatens regional economies and energy export capabilities that these nations depend upon for economic stability and political legitimacy during extended international crisis and military conflict scenarios that exceed normal alliance coordination and burden-sharing arrangements. Congressional oversight of Persian Gulf military positioning reveals systematic gaps in American naval capabilities for simultaneous Hormuz reopening, Iranian retaliation management, and regional conflict containment, while Iranian closure operations could trigger comprehensive regional warfare involving multiple proxy networks, missile attacks against regional allies, and escalation scenarios that exceed current American military positioning and alliance coordination frameworks for effective crisis management and conflict termination through negotiated resolution rather than sustained military operations. You know, when I analyze the broader implications for global energy security and supply chain resilience, what becomes clear is that successful Iranian Hormuz closure demonstrates systematic vulnerabilities in international commerce and energy infrastructure that other nations and non-state actors could exploit for economic warfare and political coercion, while existing international frameworks for maritime security and commercial navigation prove inadequate for addressing comprehensive choke point control by determined regional powers with advanced military capabilities. The timing implications suggest that Iranian domestic crisis creates optimal conditions for Hormuz closure because regime leadership calculates that international attention focuses on domestic humanitarian concerns and political transition rather than preemptive military positioning and alliance coordination that effective Hormuz security would require before Iranian closure operations achieve tactical and strategic advantages through geographical positioning and defensive preparation that subsequent reopening operations cannot easily overcome through conventional naval superiority. But there is also systematic opportunity for international diplomatic engagement that addresses legitimate Iranian security concerns and regional influence requirements while preventing Hormuz closure through comprehensive regional security frameworks, economic cooperation initiatives, and energy infrastructure diversification that provides Iranian leadership with strategic alternatives to economic warfare and international confrontation through negotiated resolution and cooperative regional development rather than continued isolation and military confrontation. I think what we need to recognize about the precedent implications is that successful Iranian Hormuz closure provides systematic template for other choke point control scenarios throughout global shipping and energy infrastructure, where determined regional powers can leverage geographical advantages and asymmetric military capabilities to achieve strategic objectives through economic warfare and commercial disruption that traditional military deterrence and diplomatic pressure cannot adequately address through existing international frameworks and alliance coordination mechanisms. The intelligence community faces systematic challenges in assessing Iranian closure timing, operational capabilities, and strategic objectives, while Iranian military planning and Revolutionary Guard activities operate under enhanced security and information control that prevents adequate intelligence collection about closure preparation, defensive positioning, and coordination with proxy networks that effective American and allied response planning requires for preemptive positioning and rapid reopening operations during extended closure scenarios and regional conflict escalation. Congressional intelligence oversight confronts unprecedented scenarios where Iranian economic warfare through Hormuz closure creates both immediate global economic crisis and systematic regional military conflict, while existing authorities and policy frameworks assume sequential rather than simultaneous economic and military challenges that exceed traditional crisis management and alliance coordination capabilities for effective international response and conflict resolution through multilateral cooperation rather than unilateral American military operations. What makes Iranian Hormuz strategy particularly effective for regime survival objectives is that it creates immediate global economic pressure for diplomatic accommodation and sanctions relief, while demonstrating Iranian strategic relevance and regional influence that domestic opposition and international isolation have systematically challenged through political pressure and economic warfare designed to force regime change and democratic transition rather than continued theocratic governance and regional power projection. The regional security architecture implications extend beyond immediate Hormuz closure into systematic demonstration that existing alliance frameworks and military positioning cannot adequately protect critical global infrastructure against determined asymmetric warfare and economic coercion, while Iranian success encourages other regional powers to develop similar choke point control capabilities and economic warfare strategies that challenge existing international order and commercial security frameworks. The economic recovery implications include systematic global recession risks and energy supply disruption that exceed current strategic petroleum reserve capabilities and alternative energy infrastructure. While sustained, Hormuz closure creates cascading effects throughout international commerce and financial markets that require unprecedented international coordination and economic cooperation for effective crisis management and supply chain restoration during extended military conflict and regional instability scenarios. But there is also the broader international law implications where Iranian Hormuz closure violates freedom of navigation principles and commercial shipping rights while creating systematic challenges for international maritime law enforcement and naval cooperation that existing United Nations frameworks and maritime security agreements cannot adequately address through traditional diplomatic resolution and international legal mechanisms during regional conflict and economic warfare scenarios. Recovery scenarios from Iranian Hormuz closure require comprehensive naval operations, regional alliance coordination, alternative energy supply development, and economic cooperation frameworks that exceed current American military capabilities and international institutional capacity, while closure duration and regional conflict escalation determine global economic impact and political stability throughout multiple regions, simultaneously affected by energy supply disruption and commercial navigation suspension. As I conclude this analysis, I recognize that Iranian Hormuz closure threat represents more than regional military challenge or energy supply disruption, but rather systematic economic warfare capability that leverages global infrastructure vulnerabilities and alliance coordination limitations to achieve strategic objectives through international economic pressure and regional military confrontation that existing international frameworks cannot adequately address, while demonstrating that critical global infrastructure requires unprecedented international cooperation and military coordination for protection against determined asymmetric warfare and chokepoint control by regional powers with advanced military capabilities and strategic patience for sustained economic warfare operations.